Ethan Cole tapped gently on his keyboard, the glow of the screen reflecting in his tired, coffee-darkened eyes, while lines of code scrolled across his monitor like tiny rows of marching soldiers. The rest of the office sat in darkness, far past normal working hours, and outside the great windows of the 19th floor, the city lights shimmered below in endless rivers of red, white, and gold. He was 30 years old today, though he barely remembered it was his birthday. Long hours and looming deadlines had reduced the day to just another mild event in an unremarkable month. He recalled, with a small pang of regret, how once he had dreamt of traveling the world, or perhaps, in more fanciful moments, traveling beyond it. But for now, his daily orbit rarely exceeded the route between his tiny apartment and the lofty tower of his programming job. The latest software patch refused to compile, giving him error after error, and he felt his frustration building like a storm behind his eyes. He exhaled, taking a moment to rub the bridge of his nose, which bore the slight indent of many hours spent wearing old reading glasses. When he had started in the tech world, excitement and curiosity had animated him. Possibilities seemed endless. Yet, as the months turned to years, he found himself lulled into the ordinary rhythms of debugging, coffee, deadlines, and more debugging. Still, he pressed forward, determined, for that was his way. Once he decided on a task, he saw it through. Outside, the old clock tower across the street chimed 8 times, each ring resonating in his chest. Typically, Ethan would trudge home around now, pop a frozen dinner in the microwave, and maybe treat himself to a late-night gaming session if he felt adventurous. But that night, a subtle pang in his gut told him something was different, like a current in the air, hinting that the quiet routine of daily life was about to be uprooted in spectacular fashion. He was about to find out just how right he was. He rose from his chair, saving his progress, and noticed an abrupt hush in the hallway. Usually, the cleaning staff would be bustling about, vacuuming or chatting softly, but instead, the corridor stood silent. Before he could wonder too deeply, the door behind him burst open with a whoosh, and 3 of his closest friends tumbled inside, wearing broad grins. He recognized them at once. Marcus, tall and broad-shouldered, with hair as curly as a spring. Tasha, slender and energetic, eyes dancing with mischief. And Jade, her short hair dyed a striking magenta, always the ringleader of their escapades. Ethan stiffened, blinking in surprise. They weren't supposed to have security clearance to get up here this late. He had only given Jade the code in case of real emergencies. But then again, Jade's definition of an emergency was often flexible. "Happy birthday," Tasha exclaimed, flinging confetti in his direction. "What are you guys doing here?" Ethan asked, though his voice was colored more by curiosity than anger. A small flutter in his chest hinted that maybe, just maybe, they'd remembered his birthday better than he had. "You didn't think we'd let you sulk in front of a keyboard on the big 3-0, did you?" Jade teased, leaning casually against the office door. "We're kidnapping you for your own good." Marcus patted his shoulder with a wide grin. "Trust us, man, you deserve something more than code lines for a celebration." Ethan let out a breathy chuckle, glancing at his half-finished project. "Well, I do have a major bug I need to fix by tomorrow morning. But, hey, maybe I can spare a couple hours." Tasha snapped her fingers. "That's the spirit," she said brightly, already tugging Ethan's jacket from the back of his chair and pulling him toward the door. "Get your coat, Code Monkey. We're taking you someplace special." He smiled despite himself, thankful for their thoughtfulness. They rode the elevator down together, Jade wiggling with excitement in her seat, Marcus humming a mysterious tune, and Tasha exchanging conspiratorial glances with them both. As they reached the street, Tasha signaled for a driverless taxi. In a moment, a sleek yellow hovercab drifted to the curb with a mechanical hiss, and the door slid open, revealing plush seats and the faint smell of artificial pine. The city lights reflected off the cab's tinted windows, creating an ethereal glow that bathed them all in gold. They piled in, still refusing to tell Ethan their plan. "So, you all chipped in for a secret birthday present?" he asked, amused. Jade scooted closer. "Something like that," she said, her eyebrows arching mischievously. "Let's just say it's an experience you won't forget." Ethan felt a small, unsure pang in his stomach. Jade's surprises were legendary, and sometimes borderline illegal. Once, for Tasha's birthday, Jade had arranged a private break-in at the local arcade after hours, complete with giant robots and retro games that were otherwise locked away in the storeroom. So, Ethan braced for anything. Marcus tapped the back of the driver's seat and spoke in a hushed tone. "Take us to the Velvet Horizon." The driverless taxi beeped in acknowledgement. The name alone made Ethan's heart skip. The Velvet Horizon was rumored to be a club, an ultra-exclusive place known for high-tech illusions, live music from across the galaxy, and rumored black market connections. He had never dared go there, or even try to find it. It sat on the fringe of rumor, rumored to be a hotspot for cosmic travelers. People whispered that, sometimes, unsavory or unusual clientele would slip through its doors: smugglers, alien dignitaries, and mysterious off-world aristocrats. "You guys sure about this?" Ethan asked, half excited and half wary. But Marcus just grinned. Tasha giggled, and Jade patted his knee. "Trust us, it's your birthday. You get the star treatment," she said. The taxi slid away into the streaming river of neon lights, the silhouettes of towering skyscrapers soaring above them. Eventually, they turned into a narrow alley, where tall buildings seemed to lean inward, hugging them with looming shadows. The Velvet Horizon wasn't marked by any sign. It was simply a black door beneath a flickering overhead lamp. The only hints at its significance were the subtle patterns etched into the dark metal, celestial shapes, and swirling lines that shimmered with hidden fluorescence. Ethan felt his pulse quicken as they stepped from the cab onto the alley's slick pavement. The night air smelled faintly of ozone and stale city smog. With Jade leading, they approached the unmarked door, which slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing a short corridor lit by purple and white streaks of neon. A tall, stern-faced bouncer glowered at them from behind a metal podium. "Invitation?" he growled. Jade flashed a silver pass she had apparently acquired, and the bouncer's glare melted into a curt nod. Moments later, they were inside. Ethan's senses were instantly overwhelmed by pounding music, swirling lights, and the faint tingle of an artificial gravity field that made his stomach feel delightfully weightless. The main floor opened up to a vast space, with balconies looming overhead, and in the center, a stage flickered with holographic performances, ephemeral shapes dancing to the beat. Some patrons were obviously human, but others were decidedly not. Ethan noticed one creature with elongated arms shimmering with scales, and another with eyes that glowed a soft blue in the dimness. "Whoa," Ethan breathed, turning to Jade. "I had no idea this place was so exotic." Jade winked. "We've only just begun," she said, guiding him through the crowd. "I promised you a night you'd never forget." They navigated among the throng, passing a bar where an automated bartender mixed drinks in slender, luminous glasses, swirling iridescent liquids. Tasha ordered them a tray of sweet cocktails that sparkled with tiny motes of light, and they raised them together in a toast to Ethan. With that first sip, a pleasing warmth spread through him, and for a moment, he forgot all about deadlines and debugging. He was about to ask Jade just how she'd managed to get them in here, but he stopped short as Marcus pointed up toward an elevated lounge area, cloaked in half shadow, half flicker of neon. "That's where we go next," Marcus said, exchanging a knowing grin with Jade. Ethan followed his friends up the winding stair, heart drumming with anticipation. The lounge was quieter, hidden behind a translucent curtain that dampened the music's roar. Plush seats were arranged in a semicircle, and the lighting was soft, tinted green and gold. A few patrons in lavish attire lounged about, whispering in low voices. On a small side table stood a silver tray, upon which sat a single rose-like flower that glowed faintly. Ethan wasn't sure if it was decorative or exotic, but in the Velvet Horizon, it could have been both. "Sit, birthday boy," Jade ordered, nearly pushing Ethan onto the plush sofa. Tasha and Marcus perched beside him, practically vibrating with excitement. "Okay, so," Jade began, leaning forward. "When a guy turns 30, his friends usually throw a big party, buy him a watch, or take him to some mediocre nightclub. But we know you. You like your coffee strong, your code perfect, and your personal life. Well, let's just say it's a little lacking in excitement, right?" She paused, her eyes twinkling. "So we decided to do something extraordinary." Before Ethan could protest, Marcus reached into a small satchel and pulled out a device that looked like a black orb covered in swirling runes. He tapped it, and it emitted a soft glow, humming faintly. The hum seemed to harmonize with the lounge's subdued music, sending curious vibrations through Ethan's skin. "What is that?" Ethan asked. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the device. He sensed something unusual, maybe otherworldly, in its design. "You'll see," Tasha murmured, grinning. She nodded toward a second curtain that separated them from the rest of the lounge. "Just be open-minded, all right?" "Always," Ethan said, though his voice quivered slightly with uncertainty. The curtain parted, and a figure stepped through. She stood tall, nearly 6 feet, slender but poised, and in the lounge's gentle light, her emerald green skin shimmered softly. Her hair, a cascade of silver, framed a face that was both alien and strangely captivating. High cheekbones, elegant features, and luminous silver eyes that seemed to catch every flicker of light. She wore an outfit of flowing, translucent fabric woven with subtle patterns of starlight, draped around her limbs in graceful folds. She paused at the threshold, her gaze flicking from Jade, to Tasha, to Marcus, and finally settling on Ethan. For a moment, time seemed to slow, the lounge's background hum fading into stillness. Ethan's heart hammered as he realized she was, without a doubt, not human. And yet, there was something in her eyes, an expression of curiosity, of gentle warmth. He realized he was staring, wide-eyed, like a novice explorer gazing upon a breathtaking new planet. "I present to you," Jade said, waving an arm with dramatic flourish, "a one-of-kind birthday gift, a chance to meet and spend time with an extraordinary visitor from beyond our world. Ethan, meet Lyra." Ethan's jaw went slack. He had heard rumors of alien visitors mingling with humans, especially in certain underground circles, but never had he expected to encounter one so closely, so intimately. And certainly not for his birthday. "Hello, Ethan Cole," Lyra said, her voice low, melodic, tinged with an accent shaped by unknown star systems. "I've been asked to make your birthday an unforgettable one." Ethan struggled to find his voice. Hi," he managed, a faint flush coloring his cheeks. "It's, very nice to meet you." Lyra inclined her head, stepping closer. Ethan rose on unsteady legs, extending a hand automatically, as human custom demanded. She studied his hand for a moment, then delicately placed her own in it. Her skin felt cool to the touch, with a texture that was soft yet slightly different, as if faint scales or a subtle ridge lay just beneath. His heart pounded at the unthinkable strangeness of it. She was real, and she was standing right there, looking at him like he was the interesting one. "It's a pleasure," Lyra said quietly, and the corner of her lips curved into a slight, cautious smile. How did you find her?" Ethan asked, turning to Jade in disbelief. But Jade only shrugged, an air of secrecy around her. "I have my ways," Jade said with a wink, as if that explained anything at all. Marcus folded his arms. "She's from a race called the Onari," he offered. "I'm sure you've heard rumors about them, arranging elite companionship for high-paying clients, especially those with advanced interests. But Lyra's the best." Ethan swallowed hard. "Elite companionship," he echoed, mind spinning. His friends had hired him an alien date? For his 30th birthday? Lyra spoke again, gently drawing his attention back to her. "If this arrangement makes you uncomfortable, I can excuse myself. It is only by agreement that I am here, to make your day memorable and pleasant. My people have many customs and traditions, but we also adapt to the desires of those we meet." Ethan's eyes flicked between his friends, who suddenly seemed quite pleased with themselves, and the regal figure before him, her head slightly bowed. Something in him stirred. Perhaps it was the sense of wonder that had lain dormant within him for too long, that same spark that used to crave adventure, a glimpse beyond the monotony of his daily routine. He cleared his throat, trying to find a thread of composure. "Well," he said softly, meeting Lyra's luminous eyes, "it's definitely surprising. But I trust my friends, and I'd be honored to, spend some time with you, if you're willing." Lyra's soft smile deepened, relief and curiosity mingling in her expression. "Then we shall proceed," she replied, her voice reminiscent of a distant star's hum. "Happy birthday, Ethan Cole." Over the next couple of hours, they talked in that secluded lounge, sipping more of the sparkling cocktails and occasionally sampling exotic fruit platters brought over by polite staff. Jade, Tasha, and Marcus alternated between excited chatter and watching Ethan's obvious fascination. Lyra described small glimpses of her culture, but she seemed guarded, as if she were choosing her words carefully. She asked Ethan about his work, finding genuine interest in how humans harness digital technology. Ethan found himself explaining the intricacies of debugging code, the joys of building software, and the strange satisfaction of puzzle solving through logic. Lyra listened intently, her silver eyes reflecting the lounge's subdued lights with unfeigned interest. At some point, Jade, Tasha, and Marcus excused themselves. Tasha winked at Ethan and whispered, "We'll give you two lovebirds some space." Ethan shot her a glare, but a pang of anticipation coursed through him as he found himself alone with Lyra. They sat close on a plush sofa near a curved window, where the city outside twinkled like a futuristic dreamscape. "So," Ethan began, clearing his throat as the weight of her presence sank in. You're not just visiting Earth for companionship, right? I mean, you must have a life back on your planet or your star system." Lyra lowered her gaze, and for a moment, sadness tinged her features. "Yes," she answered quietly. "There is a life, or at least there was. Certain circumstances compelled me to leave my world in haste. Part of my arrangement with the companionship agency is mere cover. I travel, I pose, if you will, as a hired escort. But that is not my real purpose here." Ethan leaned forward, sensing the tension behind her words. A swirl of questions lodged in his mind. "Is it dangerous, what you're doing?" he asked gently. She exhaled, looking back up at him. "Potentially, yes," she admitted. "Though Earth has proven more hospitable than I expected. My people are known for holding certain traditions in high regard. When one abandons those traditions, or challenges them, conflict can follow." Her voice trailed off, and Ethan felt a strange urge to reassure her. Even though she was, by all accounts, the visitor, the exotic one, the one who presumably had greater knowledge of cosmic wonders. Yet in that moment, she seemed fragile, uncertain. He offered her a small smile, placing a tentative hand near hers. "If there's anything I can do to help," he said, I guess I'm here." Lyra studied him, the corners of her eyes softening. "Your kindness is welcome, Ethan Cole," she said softly. He was about to respond, but a sudden movement in the lounge caught his attention. The curtains parted again, revealing two towering figures in long coats, their silhouettes haloed by the neon glow from behind. They scanned the room, their faces partially concealed by scarves. The moment Lyra saw them, she stiffened. Fear flickered in her expression, and she gripped Ethan's hand with surprising strength. "Are those people you know?" Ethan whispered. "They are not my people," Lyra breathed, her voice quivering. "They are bounty hunters, agents of a powerful house that wants me returned to my planet. Or worse." Ethan felt a chill race up his spine. He caught Jade's eye across the lounge. She noticed the intruders as well, her expression shifting to guarded concern. Marcus and Tasha immediately moved behind one of the lounge partitions, putting themselves into a vantage point. The two hulking visitors strode across the plush carpeting, scanning every face with slow, methodical precision. Even the other patrons seemed to sense something ominous in their approach. Conversations dipped, chairs scraped back. The lounge's quiet tension thickened. "They can't see me," Lyra whispered urgently. "If they do, they might." Her words were cut short as the taller of the hunters locked eyes with her. A wry grin spread across his scarred face. He reached into his coat, pulling out a small device that gave off an ominous hum. "Lyra," he called, his voice reverberating with unnatural bass. "Princess Lyra of the Onari. By the decree of your father, King Zariel, we are to return you to the Empire immediately." Ethan blinked, stunned. "Princess?" he mouthed at Lyra, a swirl of disbelief flashing through his mind. She was royalty? Lyra jumped to her feet, her posture shifting from quiet vulnerability to something regal and fierce. She lifted a hand, and Ethan felt a faint ripple of energy pulse through the air. It reminded him of a magnetic field, humming just on the threshold of perception. The device in the bounty hunter's hand crackled, and he scowled. "Stay back," Lyra hissed. "You have no authority here on Earth." The second bounty hunter, a stockier figure with eyes glowing faintly from beneath a hood, laughed. "Authority or not, The price on your head will allow us to buy our own little moon if we choose, he sneered. We'll take you by force if needed. You can come willingly, or in shackles. Ethan's mind raced. Jade and Marcus moved in, hovering at the edges, trying to gauge if they could intervene. Tasha bit her lip, her eyes darting around for an exit. Ethan recalled the black orb Marcus had earlier, some sort of device that might have significance now. Meanwhile, Lyra's posture grew tense, and her hands splayed out, faint arcs of energy dancing between her fingertips. You must leave, she said firmly, or face the consequences. The taller hunter smirked, brandishing his device. Don't forget, Princess, we know your power, but we also know how to subdue it. Faster than Ethan could process, the device flashed. A beam of blue-white energy crackled across the lounge, heading straight for Lyra. She reacted with lightning speed, raising her arms in a defensive stance. The beam collided with an invisible shield just inches from her body, sending sparks cascading through the dimly lit space. Patrons screamed, ducking under tables or fleeing. Chairs and tables clattered, drinks shattered on the floor, and the lounge's music cut out abruptly in a shriek of feedback. Jade sprinted forward, hurling a barstool at one of the hunters. Marcus tried to tackle the other from behind, only to be shoved away by a forceful elbow. Ethan felt adrenaline surge, his protective instincts roaring to life. Lyra glanced over her shoulder, her eyes locking with Ethan's. We must escape, she said, her voice trembling. I won't let them hurt you or your friends. He nodded, his heart pounding. Then let's go, he managed, rushing to her side. Together, they darted through the scattered crowd, weaving around overturned tables. Jade, Marcus, and Tasha followed close behind, but the bounty hunters were hot on their heels, brandishing weapons that spat sizzling arcs of energy. Projectiles crashed into the floor and walls, leaving scorched marks on the lounge's expensive decor. Out the back, Jade shouted, pointing to a corridor. They sprinted, breath hammering in their chests, as the corridor lights flickered menacingly. Doors lined the passage, each one locked or sealed with advanced security. At the far end, a single red exit sign glowed. They dashed through, bursting into a secondary alley illuminated by a single, flickering street lamp. Keep moving, Marcus urged, his voice strained. We'll find a place to hide. But the moment they turned the corner, they saw another figure step from the shadows, a slender alien in black armor, presumably another member of the bounty hunter team. He lifted a device, scanning them with a quick flicker of dull orange light. They're here, he said into a wrist communicator. We have them cornered. Lyra's eyes flared, a desperate resolve taking hold. She whipped around, looking for any path forward. The gloom cast tall, ominous shadows across the alley, and the hum of city traffic hovered in the distance. Tasha cursed under her breath, rummaging in her pockets for her phone, presumably to call for help. We're trapped, Jade said, her voice taut. What now? Lyra turned to Ethan. I am sorry, she whispered, her gaze filled with remorse. I did not want to bring trouble to you on your birthday, or at all. But now, I must protect you. Ethan swallowed, forcing a small smile. We'll find a way out, he said. We'll figure it out together. The slender bounty hunter advanced, unholstering a sleek weapon. Footsteps echoed behind them, signaling the approach of the first two hunters. The group was cornered, forced into a single narrow alley with no easy escape. Tasha clutched Marcus's hand. Jade's eyes flickered with both terror and defiance. Ethan's thoughts whirled. He was a programmer, not a fighter. How could he protect them? Or help Lyra? Lyra shifted, raising her arms, arcs of that mysterious energy dancing again between her fingers. She set her jaw, regal determination etched on her features. Her entire being seemed to radiate a gentle hum of power, like an electrical charge building in the air before a storm. The bounty hunters hesitated, clearly wary of her abilities. Your father wants you back, the slender one said, voice echoing in the gloom. Don't force us to harm these humans. Lyra trembled, anger flashing in her silvery eyes. My father lost his right to call me daughter the day he... She never finished that thought. The second two hunters arrived, boxing them in. Lyra knew she couldn't protect them all and fight off three well-armed pursuers. Ethan saw her expression falter momentarily, regret mingling with desperation. He felt a knot in his chest, He couldn't let them be captured. Mustering all his courage, he fumbled in his pocket for his phone, calling up a ride-hail app. Maybe a quick escape could be arranged if... The phone beeped. No signal, Tasha hissed, glancing at her own phone. They must be jamming it. The slender bounty hunter gave a nod. Enough stalling, he commanded. Surrender, or your friends will pay the price. Ethan clenched his fists. Then, from behind them, a loud clang rang out, as if someone had leapt onto a metal dumpster. All heads turned. There stood Jade, holding a small orb that pulsed with shifting patterns of light, the same device Marcus had shown earlier. She grinned, and before the hunters could react, she hurled it forward. The orb soared through the air in a graceful arc, landing on the concrete with a crack. Instantly, it erupted in a vortex of swirling energy. Lights and shapes spun outward in a dizzying cascade, forming what looked like a shimmering portal. The vortex cast the alley in an eerie glow, sucking in bits of debris and swirling dust. Run! Jade shouted. Lyra grabbed Ethan's hand with a strength and urgency that nearly pulled his arm out of its socket. Marcus and Tasha clutched each other, diving for the swirling portal. The bounty hunters roared in anger, raising their weapons, firing blasts that sizzled past them. But the group was already tumbling through the shimmering vortex, disoriented, hearts hammering. A sudden wave of vertigo gripped Ethan. He felt as if gravity turned sideways, then inside out. 1,000 colors blurred across his vision. His body felt weightless, suspended in pure energy. He heard the startled cries of his friends, mixed with the thunder of the swirling phenomenon. Beside him, Lyra's hand gripped his tightly, her presence the only anchor in that chaotic swirl of light. Then, with a bright flash and a deafening crack, they were spat out onto solid ground. Ethan landed on his side, coughing, a dull ache spreading through his ribs. The air around them felt different, cooler, thinner. He blinked to clear his vision, trying to see where they were. The portal behind them flickered, sputtering like a dying ember, and finally collapsed with a low hum. They were in a forest, or something like a forest. Tall spires of what resembled metal trees rose around them, crowned by leaves of dark blue. The sky overhead was not the orange glow of city lights, nor the typical earthly black, but rather a deep, cosmic purple dotted with unfamiliar stars and swirling nebulae. The air smelled of copper and pine, both familiar and alien. Jade, Marcus, and Tasha sprawled a few feet away, groaning and dusting themselves off. Ethan's mind reeled. Where are we? He managed, standing on shaky legs and pulling Lyra up with him. Jade shook her head, eyes wide. I have no idea, she gasped. I just knew that orb was some sort of emergency escape device from a black market contact. Didn't expect it to fling us off-world, I guess. Marcus helped Tasha stand. Sure looks like off-world, he muttered, glancing at the towering metal-bark trees. Either that, or the weirdest national park on Earth. Lyra's expression softened with relief, though she still appeared unnerved. We're in the Outland Grove, she murmured, scanning the horizon. It's an unaligned region near the border of my father's empire. I never imagined we could come here through a jump device. She turned to Jade, eyes shining with gratitude. You saved us. Jade shrugged, though a faint blush tinged her cheeks. Yeah, well, I was hoping it'd just teleport us to another part of Earth, but I guess the orb had bigger plans. Looks like we're definitely off the bounty hunter's radar now. Ethan gazed around in wonder. Strange night-blooming flowers glowed softly near the trunks of the metallic trees, and the distant chirping of unknown creatures filled the hush. It was breathtaking and utterly terrifying. Wait, Tasha said, hugging her arms. We're stuck on an alien planet now, or some cosmic region, with no idea how to get home. The group exchanged worried looks. Lyra stepped forward. We must remain calm, she said gently. The Outland Grove is dangerous in some ways, but if we stay alert, we should find a settlement not far from here. Many travelers, smugglers, and wanderers come to this region. We can likely find a starport or a ship that can return you to Earth. Ethan exhaled, relief mixing with anxiety. Okay, he said, forcing confidence into his tone. One step at a time. We find a starport, we get home. And we make sure you're safe from those bounty hunters. At that, Lyra's gaze dropped, shadows flickering across her emerald features. I must tell you all something, she said softly, glancing at each of them. I have not been entirely honest. I was not merely defying a father's will, or avoiding an arranged marriage. I was running from a far darker fate. Silence fell, broken only by the distant murmur of the alien breeze. Ethan took her hand gently. "We're listening," he whispered. Lyra closed her eyes, summoning courage. "My father, King Zariel, rules over the Onari Empire, spanning many star systems. Our people possess unique gifts, an ability to manipulate certain frequencies of energy for healing, defense, even telepathy, in rare cases. But my father has grown paranoid, seeking alliances through forced unions, expanding his domain in an unrelenting quest for power. When I learned the full extent of his plans that involved subjugating smaller worlds, imposing tributes, crushing dissent, I dared to speak against him." A tremor coursed through her slender frame. "He sought to betroth me to a cruel prince of a neighboring star kingdom, forging a new alliance based on conquest. I refused, publicly. I threatened to leave, and he imprisoned me. I escaped with the help of loyalists who believed in a kinder vision for the Onari. They spirited me away on a starship, and I ended up on Earth, under the guise of a companion service. My father dispatched bounty hunters to retrieve me, or to silence me if I would not comply." She took a slow breath, meeting Ethan's gaze. "Now you are all caught up in this, and I am so sorry. If I had known that hiring me for a party would place you in danger, I would have refused." Ethan's chest tightened. He felt for her deeply. "Don't apologize," he said, exchanging glances with Jade, Marcus, and Tasha. "We're the ones who invited you into this. And we're not leaving you to face this alone." Jade nodded emphatically. "No way. We got you into this jam. Accidentally, sure, but we're not abandoning you." Marcus gave a wry smile. "Besides, this is kind of the biggest adventure we've ever had. Beats debugging code, right, Ethan?" Tasha, though clearly frightened, nodded too. "Yeah, we can't just go home and let her get captured by some tyrant. Let's figure this out." Lyra looked at them, eyes bright with gratitude that sparkled like silver moonlight. "Thank you," she whispered. "I shall do all in my power to ensure your safety." Ethan felt a spark of courage. "All right," he said. "Let's find a way through this forest, or grove, or whatever it is. You said there's a settlement nearby?" Lyra pointed toward a faint glimmer in the distance, visible through the alien tree line. "We should head that way," she said. "Stay close. There might be creatures here that you do not wish to meet unprepared." And so, they set off, forging a path through the outland grove, stepping carefully over roots that hummed with hidden energy, around phosphorescent plants that rustled in unseen breezes. Occasionally, the trees themselves groaned as if alive, metal bark shifting with soft chimes. Ethan felt awe and excitement mingled with the sting of fear. Less than an hour ago, he had been in a neon-lit club on Earth, celebrating a birthday he didn't much care about. Now he was on an unknown planet, or region beyond Earth, walking with an alien princess who wielded electromagnetic powers, flanked by his best friends, fleeing from bounty hunters. It was so surreal, he almost laughed. But the tension in the air kept him focused. Jade led the way, surprisingly adept at forging paths, with Tasha helping navigate. Marcus protected their flank, occasionally muttering about how nothing in his life had prepared him for any of this. Lyra remained at Ethan's side, guiding him over tricky spots, her quiet presence reassuring. She radiated a calm resolve that reassured him everything would, somehow, turn out all right. At length, the tall metal-bark trees began to thin. They emerged onto a ridge overlooking a vast plain studded with clusters of strange structures, some shaped like domes, others like twisted spires. Neon lights glowed in certain windows, suggesting a settlement of sorts. A series of flickering luminescent lines crisscrossed the plain, possibly roads or channels of energy. "There," Lyra said softly. "That's a trading outpost called Iridis Vale. If we're fortunate, we might find a pilot or a smuggler willing to ferry us back toward Earth, or at least to safer territory." Jade patted Ethan's shoulder, pointing toward the distant city. "Time to see if they take Earth credit cards, right?" Ethan chuckled, the tension momentarily lifting. "Yeah, let's hope the universal currency is still, well, universal." Under Lyra's guidance, they descended the ridge. The sky overhead glistened with more stars than they had ever seen, swirling patterns reminiscent of cosmic storms. As they approached Iridis Vale, They could hear the faint hum of machinery, and the roads turned from soft loam to a metallic surface that vibrated beneath their feet. A large gateway rose before them, flanked by towering statues of unknown deities, each one intricately carved with eyes of polished crystal. They glowed faintly in the purple starlight, giving off an eerie but welcoming presence. Once past the gates, they found themselves in a bustling marketplace, if one could call it that at such a late hour. Dozens of stalls displayed wares from across the galaxy, shimmering fabrics, exotic fruits that buzzed with internal energy, contraptions with floating holographic interfaces, and weapons of sleek alien design. The crowd was just as diverse. Humanoid aliens of every shape and color, mechanical constructs rolling or hovering in the streets, and a handful of humans who had apparently come from other corners of known space. Conversations swirled in countless languages, the air thick with pungent scents and rapid commerce. Lyra paused, scanning the crowd warily. "We should find someone trustworthy," she murmured. "Not easily bribed by bounty hunters. I know a contact who might help, an old ally of my mother's house. Her name is Seraphina. She runs a small inn near the center of town." Ethan nodded. "Lead the way," he said. "We'll follow." Careful to keep a low profile, they wove through the late-night throng, passing flickering neon signs and groups of travelers swathed in cloaks. In the distance, a towering spire glowed with lines of energy that pulsed skyward, possibly some form of communication array. A part of Ethan marveled at the technology on display, so advanced, yet integrated seamlessly with the alien environment. Finally, they arrived at a modest two-story building of polished black stone, with an elegant door carved in swirling patterns reminiscent of swirling galaxies. A small sign, etched in multiple alien scripts, presumably read, "Seraphina's Rest." Lyra inhaled, steeling herself, and knocked on the door. Moments later, the door cracked open, revealing a wiry, middle-aged woman with pale blue skin and elongated ears. Her golden eyes narrowed suspiciously, until recognition sparked. "Princess Lyra," she whispered, glancing behind to ensure no eavesdroppers lurked. "I never thought to see you here. Quick, come in." She ushered them inside, bolting the door behind them. The interior of Seraphina's Rest was cozy, lit by floating orbs that cast warm, gentle light over plush cushions and low tables. Soft rugs covered the floor, each woven with intricate symbols. A calming scent, like lavender crossed with citrus, wafted through the air. "Is my father's guard searching for me here as well?" Lyra asked, voice strained. Seraphina nodded grimly. "Rumors swirl of bounty hunters crossing the Outland Grove. I heard they might be closing in on the Veil. Word is, your father's offering a hefty reward. I trust you seek passage away from their reach." Lyra hesitated, glancing at Ethan and his friends. "Yes, and not just for me. My human companions must return to Earth safely, too." Seraphina's gaze swept over Ethan, Jade, Marcus, and Tasha. Compassion and concern flickered in her eyes. "You bring unusual company," she remarked. "But I owe your mother a debt of honor. I will do all I can to assist you." Ethan felt a wave of relief. Seraphina gestured for them to sit around a low table, then poured them steaming cups of a fragrant beverage. "We'll talk as we refresh ourselves," she said. "You all look half dead from your journey." And so they drank, the liquid tasting of honey and mint, warming them from within. Lyra explained the events on Earth, the unexpected involvement of Ethan and his friends, and their desperate flight through the jump portal. Seraphina listened with rapt attention, occasionally shaking her head at the mention of King Zariel's cruelty. "Brave child," Seraphina said softly, placing a comforting hand on Lyra's. "Your mother would be proud that you stand against his tyranny." Jade took a sip of her drink, grimacing slightly at its unfamiliar tang. "So, can we get a ship? I mean, how does it work? Do we, charter a flight the way we'd hail a taxi on Earth?" Seraphina allowed herself a small smile. "In Iridis Vale, you can find all manner of craft for the right price. But it's not official lines you want. Official starport logs could alert the bounty hunters. You need a smuggler or an independent pilot, one who cares more for coin and loyalty than for your father's gold." Tasha glanced sideways at Ethan. "We don't exactly have the right currency, do we?" Seraphina waved a hand. "I can help with that. We'll pool resources, find a pilot I know. She calls herself Captain Ayala. A bit rough around the edges, but dependable. Lyra sighed, relief in her eyes. Thank you, Serafina. If we can just get aboard her ship, we might be able to cross star lanes beyond my father's territory and eventually get these humans back to Earth. Marcus, who had been quietly absorbing everything, finally spoke. And once we're safe, what about you, Lyra? Will you keep running? Lyra hesitated, pain flickering across her features. I do not know, she admitted. Part of me knows I can't keep running forever. My father's reign must be challenged. But my resources are limited, and I can't ask you to fight a war on my behalf. Jade placed a reassuring hand on Lyra's shoulder. One step at a time. Let's get to Earth, or somewhere safe, and then see what we can do. Serafina nodded briskly. Rest here tonight. I'll reach out to Captain Aella first thing in the morning. The Veil has eyes everywhere, but if we move discreetly, the bounty hunters won't know you're here until you're already gone. With that, she guided them to a set of small but comfortable rooms upstairs. The walls were carved with swirling patterns, letting in faint starlight from the outside. Ethan and Lyra were shown to a separate room from Jade, Marcus, and Tasha, presumably out of courtesy or a subtle assumption about their relationship. Ethan's cheeks warmed slightly at the thought, but he did not protest. Once inside, the door closed, and the flickering light of a single floating orb illuminated the small space. Lyra paced the room, clearly agitated. I feel terrible for dragging you all into this, she murmured, hugging her arms. You should be celebrating your birthday, not fleeing for your life. Ethan stepped forward, gently touching her arm. I was stuck in a rut, he admitted, his voice soft, forgetting what wonder felt like. True, this is more danger than I ever dreamed, but I don't regret saving you. She turned to him, her luminous eyes moist. Thank you, she whispered. I know not what fate awaits, but it comforts me to have such loyal companions. They stood there, the silence stretching, their closeness stirring a surge of emotions in Ethan's chest, curiosity, warmth, protectiveness. Then, slowly, they both relaxed, exhaustion from the night's events crashing over them like a tidal wave. You should rest, Lyra said gently. We may have a long journey tomorrow. Ethan nodded, though his mind still raced with 1,000 thoughts. You too, he whispered. He watched her settle onto a soft, alien mattress that glowed faintly when touched, as if responding to body heat. He found a small sofa-like bench along the wall and stretched out, letting his weary muscles sink into the cushions. Long minutes drifted by in quiet reflection. Through the open window, Ethan glimpsed an alien moon rising in a swirl of cosmic dust, casting eerie shadows across the floor. He listened to Lyra's gentle breathing, letting it soothe his own anxious heart. If he closed his eyes, he could almost pretend it was some vivid dream. Yet, as sleep finally claimed him, he realized he wouldn't trade it for anything. This insane journey, fighting for the freedom of an alien princess, forging memories that glowed brighter than any line of code. They awoke to a dawn of pale lilac light filtering through the carved walls. Serafina aroused them quietly, cautioning that the veil was already stirring. Some suspicious newcomers arrived late in the night, she warned. Bounty hunters, by the look of them. We should move soon. Ethan and Lyra joined Jade, Tasha, and Marcus downstairs, where a simple breakfast of steamed grains and sweet fruits awaited them. Despite the knots in their stomachs, they ate quickly. Serafina then ushered them through a back door, guiding them down a narrow alley that wound between the black stone buildings. They emerged onto a modest landing pad enclosed by a tall fence of luminous filaments. There, an angular starship waited, a sleek craft of silvery metal, scuffed and scarred from countless journeys, with twin engines that hummed softly and idle. At the base of the loading ramp stood a figure clad in a worn flight jacket, a tight braid of copper-colored hair trailing down her back. She had dark green skin and a single, gleaming ocular implant where her left eye should have been. She sized them up quickly, especially pausing on Lyra. You must be Captain Aella, Ethan said, stepping forward. We appreciate your help. Aella snorted. Help, or business transaction, you mean? I don't do charity. But Serafina's vouch for you carries weight. You've got the funds. Serafina held out a small pouch jingling with what must have been local currency, crystalline coins that caught the morning light in prisms. Aella took it, nodding with mild approval. Good. Get aboard, quickly. The Port Authority is curious about new arrivals, and I'd rather not tangle with them. They hurried up the ramp, the interior of the ship a cramped but functional space with several compartments branching off from a central corridor. Captain Aella sealed the hatch behind them, while Serafina offered a quick farewell. "May fortune favor you, Princess Lyra, and your friends," she whispered. "If your path leads you back here, you'll always have a place at Serafina's rest." Lyra clasped her hands in gratitude. "You honor my mother's memory," she said. "Thank you." With that, Aella guided them to a small lounge area furnished with battered chairs and a well-worn hollow table. "Strap in," she ordered. "We're leaving immediately." Ethan, Jade, Marcus, and Tasha exchanged anxious glances, buckling themselves into seats. Lyra did the same, eyes fixed on the porthole. Aella slid into the cockpit, flipping switches and muttering under her breath. The engines rumbled louder, vibrations coursing through the hull. Outside, Ethan glimpsed a handful of figures sprinting onto the landing pad, no doubt bounty hunters, alerted to their location. Aella cursed. "They're bringing a gunship to block our exit. Idiots." She punched a control, and the starship's thrusters flared to life. A wave of force pressed them back against their seats, and the craft shot skyward, turning in a sharp arc. A flurry of laser fire streaked past the windows, but Aella deftly rolled the ship, weaving between the blasts. Jade clutched her seat, eyes wide. Marcus let out a startled whoop, half terror, half exhilaration. "Oh boy," Tasha gasped, knuckles white on the armrests. "Never thought I'd do this on a Monday morning." Ethan caught Lyra's gaze. She gave him a reassuring nod, though tension lingered around her eyes. Meanwhile, Aella fired the main engines, a deafening roar propelling them higher into the purple sky. The swirling nebula above rushed closer, filling the windows with a dazzling light show. Then, with another series of harsh jolts, the ship broke atmosphere, revealing the vastness of space. Distant stars glistened, and the curvature of the planet shrank below. Ethan's stomach fluttered with an indescribable mix of fear and wonder. Aella jerked the controls, bringing them alongside a cluster of asteroids that orbited the planet like silent sentinels. "Quickest route out of this sector is near that ring of debris," she explained through the intercom, "but hold on. That gunship might have friends." Sure enough, a moment later, scanners beeped ominously, indicating multiple signals approaching. The hollow table in the lounge flickered to show the sensor display. 3 small crafts in pursuit, all tagged with red symbols. "Here we go," Jade muttered. "Space chase." Aella's voice crackled. "I'll shake them. Keep your heads down." The next few minutes were a blur of wild maneuvers, the starship rolling and diving around drifting asteroids, lasers sizzling past in fluorescent arcs. Ethan felt as if he were in a real-life starfighter simulator. Only there was no restart button if they messed up. He clenched his teeth, trusting in Aella's evident skill. Suddenly, the ship lurched as an explosion rocked them from behind. Alarms blared. Aella cursed again. They hit the port engine stabilizer. "Hang on. I'm taking us into subspace jump now." Lyra's eyes widened. "That's risky. Could rupture the manifold. Got a better idea, Princess?" Aella snapped. Without waiting for a response, the pilot slammed a lever forward. The starfield before them elongated, turning into streaks of light. Then everything outside warped, as if the universe were being sucked into a vortex. Ethan's vision swam. Tasha groaned, pressing a hand to her mouth. Jade gritted her teeth to stifle a scream. Finally, the subspace drive stabilized, and the ship glided into a weird, shimmering tunnel of swirling blues and purples. The pursuit ships were gone, presumably left behind in real space. The alarms silenced, though a faint beeping signaled ongoing damage reports. Aella's voice crackled through the lounge's speakers. "We're in subspace. The hull's battered, but we'll manage. Next stop, safe territory, assuming we can patch up the stabilizer before the drive overheats." They collectively exhaled. Marcus let out a shaky laugh of relief. Tasha released the death grip on her seat. Jade was the first to unbuckle, heading to the cockpit, presumably to speak with Aella about repairs. Ethan slumped back, adrenaline fading, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. Lyra removed her harness as well, moving to kneel beside him. "You did well," she said softly, placing a comforting hand on his arm. He scoffed. All I did was sit and pray we wouldn't die. Lyra shook her head, her silver eyes warm. Your courage is remarkable. Many would have collapsed in panic by now. He felt heat flush his cheeks. Well, maybe your presence helps, he admitted. They shared a moment of unspoken affection, overshadowed by the dangers still ahead. After a short time, Jade returned from the cockpit, wiping sweat from her brow. Ayala says we have about 2 hours in subspace before we can drop back into normal space. She'll try to get us close to Earth. But, Tasha frowned. But what? She's worried about crossing any official star lanes. The Anari Empire has watchers everywhere, and your father, she nodded at Lyra, seems willing to use considerable influence. Lyra sighed. If Earth is too risky, maybe we can at least get near it, then take a smaller transport the rest of the way. Marcus pursed his lips. And once we're back, how do we keep the bounty hunters off your trail? They found you once. Lyra drew a shaky breath. I can't hide forever. Perhaps it's time I made a stand, publicly. If the humans learn about my father's tyranny, they might refuse to cooperate with him. Earth is not officially under his rule, after all. Ethan nodded, ideas sparking in his mind. We could broadcast the truth, he said quietly. If we can hack into the right channels, spread evidence of what your father's empire is doing, maybe that would cause enough outrage that he'd back off. Or at least it would rally sympathetic powers to your side. Jade grinned. Now you're thinking like a rebel. I'm totally in. Tasha gave a tentative thumbs up. It's definitely dangerous, but it might be our best shot. Marcus shrugged. I guess I'll be the voice of sanity and say this is all insane. But better insane than letting our friend get captured. Let's do it. A faint smile curved Lyra's lips, gratitude illuminating her features. I never imagined I would find such support from humans who barely know me. Thank you. Truly. Ethan gently squeezed her hand. We're in this together, he said, heart pounding with fresh resolve. The hours passed in tense anticipation. Ayala stabilized the damage enough for a controlled exit from subspace, dropping them into a star system not far from Earth. They found themselves drifting near the rings of a giant gas planet, swirling ribbons of silver and gold glistening in the darkness. Ethan, Ayala barked over the intercom. I need you in the cockpit. Surprised, he unbuckled and made his way forward, the narrow corridor thrumming with engine vibrations. In the cockpit, Ayala pointed to a flickering console. Our NAV system is glitching, she explained, frustration evident. Got hit with an ion burst. You do coding, right? Ethan nodded. Yeah, I'm a programmer. I can try to patch it. She gestured at the seat. Have at it, Earth boy. Swallowing the prickles of anxiety, he took a seat at the console, scanning lines of alien text that scrolled across the screen. The code was strange, full of unfamiliar characters, but once he grasped the syntax, he recognized certain logic structures. With a few quick modifications, he managed to bypass a damaged subroutine and reroute the system to a backup core. Lights on the console flickered, then stabilized. There, he said with a hint of pride. That should give us partial NAV control, but your autopilot might still be sketchy. Ayala grunted, impressed despite herself. Nice work. Now hold tight, dropping us toward Earth. She angled the ship toward a distant sun, which Ethan recognized as his own. The battered vessel accelerated, leaving the ringed gas giant behind in a swirl of starlight. Eventually, Earth emerged as a blue and green marble in the darkness, the faint shape of the moon orbiting it in silent companionship. Ethan felt a wave of emotion at the sight, home, shimmering like a promise. But the intercom crackled, Tasha's voice echoing. We've got company. A couple of smaller ships dropping out of subspace behind us. Ayala cursed. They must have tracked our jump signature. Could be bounty hunters again. Lyra stepped into the cockpit, face set. We cannot outrun them with our damage. We must be cunning. Ayala's hands flew over the controls. I'll try to slip into Earth's orbit. If we can get near your planet's satellites, maybe we can lose them among the debris. Ethan exchanged a worried glance with Lyra, who gripped the back of his chair. The starfield ahead grew brighter, Earth expanding in the forward windows. The sensor readouts showed 2 crafts closing in, each bristling with weapon signatures. The console beeped warnings about possible missile locks. Jade, Marcus, and Tasha hurried into the cockpit corridor, tension etched on their faces. They all braced themselves as the ship rattled, diving into the upper layers of Earth's atmosphere. Fire licked across the hull, friction causing the craft to vibrate violently. "Hold on," Ella growled, deploying atmospheric stabilizers. Outside, the sky shifted from starry black to brilliant azure, clouds whipping past in a blur. They heard the hiss of systems straining to manage re-entry. From behind, a volley of plasma bolts soared overhead, one streaking dangerously close to the cockpit window. Ella yanked the controls, sending them into a gut-wrenching roll. Jade nearly lost her footing, cursing loudly. Alarms blared, and the battered hull groaned under the stress. "We're coming in too hot," Marcus shouted. "We'll crash." Ella's lips pressed into a tight line. "We're not going to crash," she snapped, though worry tinged her tone. "I see an open area below, some sort of desert region. I'll set down there. Once on the ground, you're on your own." Lyra nodded, urgency in her eyes. "That might be our best option. Let's do it." The ship broke through the cloud cover, revealing a vast, barren desert dotted with rocky outcroppings. With a shudder and a deafening roar, Ella extended the landing gear. The craft lurched, skimming across the sand, kicking up plumes of dust and grit. Ethan's teeth rattled. Then, finally, with a tortured metallic squeal, they came to a stop. "Out," Ella commanded, unbuckling herself. "Those bounty hunters will land soon. I'll try to keep them busy, but I'm not dying for you." Ethan, Lyra, Jade, Tasha, and Marcus scrambled to gather what little they had. The ramp lowered, sending desert sunlight streaming into the dim ship interior, bright and harsh. Heat instantly assaulted them, the midday temperature stifling. "You sure you won't come?" Ethan asked Ella as they stood by the open ramp. She huffed. "Not without double pay. I have repairs to do, and I'd rather not get caught between an alien empire and Earth authorities. I'll spin a story for the bounty hunters, maybe lead them on a wild goose chase." "Now scram." They nodded their thanks, then sprinted onto the scorching sand. Behind them, Ella retracted the ramp, the ship's engines powering up again. They hurried away, seeking cover behind a ridge of large boulders. Moments later, they heard the roar of Ella's craft lifting off, followed by distant explosions as the pursuers engaged her. "She's drawing them away," Jade panted. "We owe her one." Lyra shielded her eyes from the glaring sun. "Where are we?" she asked, scanning the desolate landscape. Tasha, phone in hand, squinted at the screen. "GPS says southwestern United States, near some restricted military land." "Great." Marcus sighed. "Well, better than the bottom of the ocean, I guess." Ethan found a shaky grin. "We're alive, at least. Let's call for help." Tasha tapped her phone, cursing softly. No signal. Must be the region. Or a jammer overhead. A hush fell as they surveyed their predicament. Stuck in a searing desert, no immediate way to contact rescue, and dangerous alien pursuers possibly still in orbit. Jade leaned against a boulder, wiping sweat from her brow. "So we trek out of here on foot." Lyra frowned, turning to Ethan. "This place is unfamiliar to me, but I sense we must move quickly. If the hunters realize Ella's ruse, they'll come after us." Ethan nodded, scanning the horizon. Far in the distance, he thought he glimpsed a thin line of a road or highway. If they could reach it, maybe they'd find a passing vehicle or at least a cell signal. "Let's head that way," he suggested, pointing. "We might find help." They trudged across the desert, the sun beating down mercilessly. Hours seemed to pass in slow, parched misery. Lyra bore it with quiet determination, her emerald skin glistening with perspiration that gave her a faint sparkle. Ethan could hardly believe how quickly life had changed. He was hoofing it through scorching sands with an alien princess and 3 best friends, pursued by cosmic hunters. No code manual or debugging skill could solve this directly. But somehow, he felt more alive than ever. The stagnant corners of his mind jolted into new life. Finally, as evening shadows began to lengthen, they crested a small rise and saw an old highway cutting through the desert below. A weather-beaten sign indicated a town some miles away. Relief surged among them. With renewed energy, they clambered down to the roadside, hoping for a passing car. But the road was eerily empty, heat waves shimmering over the cracked asphalt. "I'll try again for a signal," Tasha said, holding her phone aloft. This time, a single bar winked on. Yes, I got something. Let me, let me call a rideshare. Might be a miracle if one's nearby. A few uncertain minutes passed, the group anxiously scanning the skies for any sign of ships. Eventually, Tasha's phone beeped. Unbelievable, she murmured, eyes widening. Driver's name is Manny. ETA 12 minutes. Marcus erupted in incredulous laughter. Gotta love technology. Even an alien invasion can't stop rideshares. They shared a cautious chuckle, eyes still on the horizon. Lyra, though sweaty and exhausted, managed a small smile. Earth's resourcefulness is remarkable. Indeed, about 15 minutes later, a rattling old van appeared on the highway, dust trailing behind it. It slowed upon seeing them, the rideshare logo peeling on the side door. A middle-aged man with a cowboy hat peered out the window, eyes wide as he took in the odd group standing in the desert. Y'all lost or something? Manny asked in a thick accent, sounding both curious and wary. This is the middle of nowhere. Jade flashed him her phone screen. We ordered a ride. This the right one? The man nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess. Hop it. They piled into the van, ignoring the man's bewildered stare at Lyra's emerald skin and silver eyes. Jade quickly made up a story about a sci-fi movie set and elaborate prosthetics, which Manny seemed to accept with some skepticism. Long as your money's good, he muttered, shifting gear. Where to? Tasha, checking her phone, proposed the nearest sizable city. We just need to find a motel, maybe get a rental car, and Ethan cut in, and a stable internet connection. They settled back, letting the van rumble down the dusty highway. Lyra gazed out the window at the orange and pink sky of Earth's sunset. Something about her expression told Ethan she was absorbing every detail, perhaps seeing it as the calm before the next storm. He reached over and squeezed her hand, offering silent reassurance. They arrived in a dusty desert town just after dusk. Manny dropped them off in front of a shabby motel with a neon vacancy sign buzzing overhead. They thanked him, paid generously, and watched as he drove off, glancing in the rearview mirror with lingering curiosity. The motel itself was a squat, single-story strip of rooms. The clerk at the front desk barely looked up from his phone when they asked for a couple of rooms, only grunting for ID. Jade flashed hers, forging the required details. Soon, they had 2 rooms with mismatched furniture and faint cigarette odors. It felt almost laughably normal after the cosmic vistas and starship battles. In room 11, Ethan, Lyra, and Tasha assembled around the small table, while Jade and Marcus rummaged in the second room for anything useful. Using the motel's spotty Wi-Fi, Tasha connected her laptop and set up a makeshift hotspot for Ethan's phone. They planned their next move, broadcasting the truth about King Zariel, exposing his empire's misdeeds, and urging Earth to stand firm. Lyra, Ethan asked, do you have any data, documents, transmissions, anything that proves your father's actions? She nodded, drawing a small crystal shard from a hidden pocket in her clothes. This holds records of the forced tribute, transmissions of threats, and the details of my father's alliances. It's encrypted in Onari code, but if we can translate it for humans. Ethan's eyes lit with determination. Let me see it. He slotted the shard into a universal reader Tasha had in her bag of tech gizmos. A swirl of alien text appeared on the screen, reams of data scrolling rapidly. He recognized patterns from the code he saw on Ayala's ship. I think I can do this, he murmured, heart thumping. For hours, he typed feverishly, building a custom script to decode the crystal's contents into plain English. Occasionally, Tasha or Jade offered suggestions, while Lyra hovered close, her brow furrowed with worry. The motel's Wi-Fi cut out several times, forcing them to reconnect. Each interruption made their hearts skip, fearing the bounty hunters were drawing near. At last, just before midnight, the script completed. Blocks of text, images of star charts, logs of transmissions, and even holovids materialized on Tasha's screen. They showed horrifying details, smaller planets compelled to surrender resources, rebel factions crushed by advanced weaponry, and planned expansions that threatened new star systems. Even more damning, there were official statements from Prince Kareth, the cruel suitor Lyra had been meant to marry, boasting about uniting the galaxies under an iron rule. This is huge, Jade whispered, eyes wide. We have to make this public. Marcus, who had returned from a stealthy supply run, nodded grimly. But how do we ensure it reaches the right people? Ethan pursed his lips. We need to share it with media outlets, governments, maybe the UN. Post it on social media too. Make it viral so it can't be suppressed. Once it's out, your father will know we're serious. The more people who see it, the more public outcry there'll be. The bounty hunters might think twice about abducting Lyra if they realize the entire planet is watching. Lyra exhaled, clasping Ethan's shoulder. This could spark real change, she murmured. If Earth stands against him, maybe others will find the courage too. Without hesitation, they began uploading the trove of evidence. Jade wrote a scathing summary in an online post, linking the raw data. Tasha fired off the information to major media organizations under pseudonymous accounts, referencing the Onari Empire's infiltration on Earth. They braced for immediate pushback or a system shutdown. But, unbelievably, the data spread. Within minutes, curious netizens latched on to the bizarre story: an alien empire, hidden expansions, a runaway princess. Some mocked it as an elaborate hoax. Others pored over the detail, the logs that showed consistent patterns, the advanced star charts. Suddenly, #OnariPrincess trended on multiple platforms. As dawn broke over the dusty motel lot, messages poured in. Journalists wanted interviews. Conspiracy theorists debated authenticity, while official channels remained silent. The group watched from behind tired eyes, hearts thudding. Then, at around 7 in the morning, CNN broadcast a breaking news segment. Alleged alien princess leaks shocking documents. Experts in astrophysics, cryptography, and xenobiology weighed in, many calling the evidence highly compelling. The tension soared in the cramped motel room. A knock on the door startled them. They froze, fear jolting through their veins. Jade gestured for silence, pressing her ear to the door. A voice called softly, "Hello? Ms. Jade Blackwood." Cautiously, Jade cracked the door. Outside stood a pair of official-looking men in suits, human men, with ID badges. "Ma'am," one said, "we're from the United States government. We'd like to speak with you, and the others, about the matter you've shared online." Lyra tensed, stepping behind Ethan. The men's manner was polite, but the mention of government involvement set alarm bells ringing. Still, they had no real choice but to comply. The men entered, scanning the room. Their eyes landed on Lyra, betraying shock despite presumably having prepared themselves for an alien encounter. They introduced themselves as Agents Williams and Park from a department that apparently handled anomalous threats. "Relax," Agent Williams said gently, raising his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "We're not here to harm anyone. Well, this is unprecedented. The White House is aware, as are other governments, that something extraordinary is unfolding. We'd like to ensure your safety." Lyra frowned. "How can I trust you are not in league with my father?" Agent Park shook his head firmly. "Your father contacted us. In fact, he demanded your immediate return to his custody, citing interstellar diplomacy. We had no direct proof of his identity or claims until your data went public. Now that we've reviewed it, we have grave concerns about his intentions." Ethan and the others exchanged hopeful looks. "So you're on our side?" Tasha ventured. Williams nodded hesitantly. "We're on Earth's side. This data strongly suggests the Onari Empire is not a benign power. The U.S. government, alongside other global powers, is taking this very seriously. We'd like to offer the princess, Lyra, correct? Sanctuary. If you come with us, we can arrange protective custody, and we can open formal talks with your father, ensuring he understands that Earth will not tolerate intimidation." Lyra's eyes darted to Ethan. He took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "If that's your wish," he said softly, "we'll stand by you." She searched the faces of her new friends, Jade, Marcus, Tasha, and finally the two agents. Slowly, she nodded. "I will accept Earth's protection, but only if you vow to help me end my father's campaign of tyranny, not just keep me hidden." Agent Park exchanged a glance with his partner, who gave a measured nod. "We'll do everything we can. The global community has never dealt with a threat on this scale, but it's better to stand together than to allow your father free rein." A wave of relief and apprehension washed over them. They packed what little they had. Moments later, black SUVs pulled into the motel lot. A small security detail escorted them away, whisking them onto a private plane. Over the next day, they traveled under heavy guard, eventually arriving at a secure facility outside Washington, D.C. By then, the world was in an uproar over the leaked intel. News anchors debated the authenticity of the cosmic princess, while behind closed doors, Earth's leaders scrambled to formulate a strategy. For her part, Lyra calmly answered questions from top officials, occasionally demonstrating her energy manipulation in carefully controlled settings. Scientists marveled at her physiology, but the U.S. government insisted on respecting her autonomy, not allowing invasive examinations. Diplomatic cables flew across the globe. Suddenly, the concept of humanity's first official alien contact overshadowed every other news story. Throughout it all, Ethan and his friends stayed by Lyra's side. The government recognized their key roles in exposing King Zariel. They were given certain freedoms, lodging in a secure annex. At times, it felt surreal. Just days ago, they'd been partying at the Velvet Horizon, and now, they were part of the biggest event in human history. Then came the ultimatum from the Onari Empire. King Zariel transmitted a stern warning. Return my daughter at once, or suffer the consequences. The leaders of Earth, armed with Lyra's testimony and the damning evidence, stood firm. They broadcast a unified response, refusing to hand over Lyra and demanding an end to Onari expansionism. Tensions soared. Rumors of war fleets mobilizing spread across the net, stoking fear worldwide. Lyra felt the weight of it all, guilt gnawing at her. I never wanted Earth to face my father's wrath, she confided to Ethan one evening, pacing a newly built terrace inside the facility. The air was crisp with the scent of pine from a row of planted trees. But I can't go back. Not to that fate. Not to that arrangement with Prince Kareth. Ethan slid his arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. You're not alone, he said. Earth is stronger than you think. We fight for what's right, and we have you to guide us, to show us how to stand firm. And we have pizza. Lyra blinked, then smiled softly, recalling the silly moment weeks ago when Ethan had offered her a slice of pizza after their chase across the cosmos. Yes, pizza, she murmured, leaning her head against his shoulder. That alone might be worth saving. He laughed gently, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. The galaxy's best comfort food. In that tender moment, the threat of an interstellar conflict felt distant, overshadowed by the closeness they shared. Days blurred into weeks. Earth's representatives engaged in urgent negotiations with Onari envoys who arrived under a flag of truce. Tensions ran high, but so did the impetus for a peaceful resolution on both sides. King Zariel, faced with universal condemnation and the risk of uniting many worlds against him, began to soften his threats. He sent messages claiming he acted only out of concern for his beloved daughter. Privately, however, word reached Lyra that Prince Kareth was enraged. He wanted revenge, not only for the public humiliation but also for losing the alliance. Tasha discovered encrypted chatter on cosmic networks indicating Kareth planned to travel to Earth personally, to either force Lyra's compliance or destroy her. The possibility sent shockwaves through the security teams. But Lyra refused to cower. I'll challenge him openly, she declared. Expose his cruelty and stand in defiance. If he dares to come, so be it. Sure enough, one fateful morning, the news broke. An Onari ship had landed, bearing Prince Kareth himself. Diplomatic negotiations were arranged in a large domed hall, reminiscent of a grand auditorium, specially prepared for interspecies talks. The entire world watched via live broadcast, every major network carrying the feed. Ethan, Jade, Marcus, Tasha, and Lyra arrived under armed escort. The hall's ceiling arched high, displaying a mosaic of Earth's solar system. Rows of seats were filled with diplomats, scientists, and press. At the center stood a circular platform where the main delegates would address each other. Cameras clicked and flashed as the group took their places. Then Prince Kareth entered, tall, imposing, with the same emerald skin as Lyra, but his features twisted by arrogance. He wore ornate armor etched with swirling symbols, and a sword-like weapon hung at his hip, crackling with embedded energy. At his side stood two hulking bodyguards, scanning the room with predatory intensity. Kareth spoke first, voice echoing with practiced authority. He demanded Lyra's immediate return, claiming it was her destiny to wed him, forging a powerful bond between their worlds. He pointed an accusing finger at Ethan and the others, labeling them kidnappers who had corrupted Lyra's mind. Lyra stepped forward, chin held high. "I am no one's property," she stated firmly, her voice ringing across the auditorium. "My father's empire and your kingdom will not bend worlds to your will. I stand with Earth and any other free planet against tyranny." The press erupted in whispers and camera shutters. Kareth's eyes blazed with fury, the faint arcs of energy dancing around his fists. "You choose these pitiful humans over your rightful place among the stars," he growled, stepping onto the platform. Lyra matched his glare. "If being among the stars means living under your cruelty, then yes, I choose these humans. They have shown me kindness and truth." Kareth's lip curled. "So be it," he snarled, flicking his gaze at the ring of security. "But this shall be settled in the ancient way. I demand a challenge of honor. If I win, you return with me. If you refuse, your father will have just cause to wage open war on Earth." A hush fell. The challenge of honor was known among the Onari as a formal duel, typically to the death. Lyra had dreaded this possibility, but her eyes flickered with resolution. "Very well," she said. "I accept, on one condition. The challenge shall not be lethal. If I defeat you, you will yield and vow to never again seek me or threaten Earth." Kareth hesitated, then scoffed. "You dare impose terms? You, who is a runaway princess? Fine. I do not fear losing to a naive child who plays with energy illusions." Before security could intervene, the stage was cleared. Diplomats and officials retreated, uncertain how to handle such an alien tradition. Cameras broadcast every moment to billions around the globe, capturing the tension. Jade, Marcus, Tasha, and Ethan stood at the edge, hearts pounding. Lyra and Kareth faced each other, arcs of swirling power building between them. The tension in the air was electric, crackling in invisible waves. Kareth struck first, unleashing a searing bolt of energy that slammed toward Lyra. She deftly parried, forming a shimmering shield with her palms. Sparks flew, lighting the auditorium in brilliant flashes. Gasps echoed as onlookers realized they were witnessing a display of psionic or electromagnetic prowess beyond human capability. Lyra retaliated, spinning gracefully and channeling a wave of force. Kareth barely managed to deflect it, staggering back. His eyes flared with hatred. Round and round they danced, arcs of energy colliding in midair, sending shockwaves that rattled the dome. Parts of the mosaic overhead cracked, scattering fragments of painted tile. Watching from the sidelines, Ethan's heart twisted. He longed to help her, but this was a challenge only she could meet. Then, in a sudden, frantic moment, Kareth fainted, luring Lyra forward, and lashed out with a savage strike of his crackling sword. Lyra raised her arm in time, forming a barrier that held for an instant, but the blade still cut across her upper arm, drawing emerald blood. A roar of dismay rose from the crowd. Ethan clenched his fists, Tasha clutching his shoulder. Lyra bit back a cry, resolute. She refused to yield, intensifying her defenses. Anger flared in her eyes, fueling her powers. The arcs of energy dancing around her fingertips glowed brighter than ever. She thrust her arms out, unleashing a thunderous pulse that sent Kareth sprawling. He crashed onto the stage floor, his sword skittering away. "Yield," she demanded, standing over him, breathing heavily. "Enough blood has been shed by your arrogance." Kareth snarled, raising his palm for another blast. But Lyra, with lightning speed, formed a crackling orb between her hands, aiming it at his chest. "Don't," she warned, "or I will end this match permanently." Silence stretched. Cameras zoomed in, broadcasting the moment worldwide. At last, Kareth lowered his arm, face twisted with rage and humiliation. "I yield," he spat, trembling with fury. "You have bested me in this farce of a duel." Relief flooded Lyra's features, though she winced from her wound. She exhaled, letting the energy orb dissipate. Applause burst from the crowd, uncertain at first, then building to a fervent cheer. Earth's leaders stared, stunned, while Onari envoys exchanged nervous looks. Kareth rose unsteadily, glowering. True to his vow, he could not continue. "You have humiliated me," he hissed, stepping close. "But you have also declared war on my empire, whether you realize it or not." Lyra's gaze hardened. If war comes, it will be by your choice. Earth stands ready. Kareth turned on his heel, summoning his guards. They stalked away, departing to their ship under jeers from many onlookers. Moments later, the auditorium erupted in celebration. Human officials rushing forward, cameras zooming in on Lyra, capturing the triumphant moment. Jade, Marcus, Tasha, and Ethan hurried to her side. Ethan gently supported her injured arm, worry etched on his face. "Are you all right?" he asked, voice trembling. She nodded, though her breathing was ragged. "It's just a scratch," she whispered. "We did it." He leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers, relief coursing through him. Her eyes shone with tears of both pain and joy. The crowd around them erupted in applause. Somewhere in the distance, an official declared that Earth recognized Lyra's right to freedom, refusing any claim from the Onari Empire that would force her to return. The broadcast soared through every channel, sending a clear message across the stars. Over the following weeks, negotiations continued. King Zariel, seeing that Earth would not capitulate, and that his empire's image was tarnished by the revelations, reluctantly agreed to reduce hostilities. Many suspect he feared uniting several advanced worlds against him if war broke out. An uneasy truce formed, with Earth refusing to hand Lyra over, and the Onari Empire ceasing open demands. Behind the scenes, rumbles of rebellion within the Empire grew stronger. Lyra's defiance had ignited hope in distant corners of her father's domain. Meanwhile, Ethan Cole found himself returning to a semblance of normal life. But nothing was truly normal anymore. He had a new friend, and more than a friend, in Lyra, who chose to stay on Earth for the time being. Official channels recognized her as a diplomatic guest, granting her a safe residence near the heart of the city. Jade, Marcus, and Tasha teased Ethan endlessly about his alien princess girlfriend, but with genuine affection. They knew they'd forged an unbreakable bond through the fires of cosmic adventure. One afternoon, not long after the dust had settled, Ethan invited Lyra to his apartment, technically the same modest place he'd been living before all of this, though the government had retrofitted some security measures. Lyra arrived in casual Earth clothes, her silver hair braided loosely, her emerald skin glowing in the soft light. She carried a box of Earth pizza, still warm, smiling shyly at the memory of when they first shared a slice. Inside, Ethan cleared aside a pile of game controllers. "Sorry about the mess," he said, cheeks flushing. She laughed, the sound musical. "After everything we've been through, a little clutter is hardly concerning." They settled on his couch, old game consoles scattered around. Ethan flipped on the TV, where a newscast talked about ongoing cosmic negotiations. He muted it, focusing instead on Lyra. She opened the pizza box, the aroma drifting through the small living room. They ate in companionable silence at first, letting the simple act of enjoying a meal ground them. Finally, Lyra set her slice down, turning toward him. "Ethan," she began softly, "I want you to know my future is still uncertain. I may need to return to my people eventually, help them break free from my father's rule. But I don't wish to lose what we've built here. This closeness, this kindness." He reached for her hand. "I'll stand by you, no matter what," he whispered. "Wherever you go, I'd be honored to walk beside you." She smiled, tears gathering in her eyes. "Then we shall see what new horizons await, together." He leaned in gently, their foreheads touching, a quiet promise passing between them. Outside, the sun dipped below the skyline, painting the windows in gold and pink. No matter the cosmic battles, the royal obligations, or the uncertain frontiers of alien politics, they had found something profoundly human and universal: connection, hope, and a choice to face the future with courage. They turned back to the pizza, the TV, and a stack of old games. Chief among them, Smash Brothers. Jade had insisted they keep practicing so Ethan could defend Earth's honor if any cosmic champion challenged him again. Lyra giggled as he booted up the console, the screen loading bright cartoon characters. "Ready for a rematch, princess?" Ethan teased, passing her a controller. She grinned, stepping into the playful banter without hesitation. And so, beneath the swirl of interstellar intrigue and the weight of potential empires rising or falling, the two of them laughed like old friends, playing games in a humble apartment. In that stolen moment of peace, the future felt bright, and the possibilities as endless as the stars. And they lived, at least for now, happily, together, on an Earth whose horizons had suddenly widened to include the infinite sky beyond, with a princess from another world by their side, forging a new path forward in hope and freedom.